With that, please welcome with a round of applause, Aaron. All righty.
Thanks,
Aaron. Aaron, why don't we start with just your background? I think people love to hear, before we get into, and end with what you're doing now, but how did you end up where you are?
Sure. Yeah. I was a psychology undergraduate. And when I came out of undergraduate, I went into research. It was in telecommunications in DC. And we were trying to predict, what people would do and how it influenced telecom regulations. And I was looking at all this research. We were asking people a lot of questions. And I've realized that the industry really didn't have any real grasp of how people made decisions. We were asking questions and asking what was important and asking people to rate what was most important, but we really didn't know how they were actually making decisions. And I thought, if I really want to make an impact on this field, I've got to get deeper into human psychology and understand how people really make choices. So I went back to graduate school, and my PhD is in judgment and decision making. I focused on quantifying emotion and integrating emotion into choice models to see if we could predict what people would do more accurately. And it turns out that when you do measure emotion and you incorporate it with cognitive trade-offs, you're able to predict what people will do more accurately. And so I was all fired up after 5 years of graduate school, came out, joined a market research firm, and I was like, look, I learned all this stuff. 40 years worth of systematic evidence of how we're irrational and behave in systematically irrational ways. And I was like, how are we doing it in market research? And I pulled up a questionnaire, and it was a Likert scale, 1 to 7. How do you feel about this brand? How satisfied are you with this brand? Are you likely to recommend this brand? And I was like, well, I just learned from 40 years of psychology that people don't have conscious access to this. Where's the advanced research? How are we measuring emotion out in the world? And, my colleague said, well, we do focus groups. We bring people into a room and we ask them questions and we get a discussion going and we watch and see, how people respond emotionally. And I thought, gosh, where's the quantitative data on emotion? And, that's how Sentient Decision Science was born. After, about 3 years of trying to change an organization that wasn't a behavioral science firm, I decided that I would start one. And that was in 2007. And the goal of the company was to translate all this knowledge that we had in behavioral science and make it practical and accessible to business. And so we started building technology that actually measures emotional response. And when we did that, our clients started to see that they were more accurate in predicting actual behavior in the market, sales, the effectiveness of advertising, whether an ad would go viral or not. And that's how Sentient was born. We were born to bridge the gap between behavioral science and business in a practical way in order to move business forward.
So, so interesting. So as you think about CMOs and the CMOs you've worked with and stuff, what are the biggest hurdles you've seen that they need to overcome as they start embracing this new approach? Yeah. I'm just curious what you've observed.
So many things facing CMOs today. First of all, breakthrough. How do you break through in this environment? Breakthrough it goes right to the root of emotion. Emotion at its core, forgive me for a second while I go academic, it's a relevance signaling mechanism. That's the purpose of emotion in the human body. It's to signal to the human in the environment what's relevant, what should I attend to, what should be capturing my attention. The stronger the emotion, the higher the personal relevance, the more attention it gets and the more action either toward or away from that thing you see in your environment for the individual. So when you think about breaking through in an environment like this, you won't break through all of this clutter unless you're touching people emotionally. And when I say emotionally, I don't mean, puppy dogs and, crying, what people typically think of, generically when they think, oh, I got emotional, I got choked up. I'm talking about all of the emotions. I'm talking about excitement and happiness and wonder and avoiding disgust and avoiding anxiety, alleviating anxiety, producing a sense of calm in a moment of stress. There are so many different emotions in consumers that we can touch. We need to touch them and touch them in a way that's relevant to people in order to break through all of the noise, and especially this year. Julie and I have been working together for 13 years. Every single election cycle, we see a drop of about 50% in recall of new products launched during an election year. And it's low to begin with. It's like 30-40% to begin with. In an election year, 20% of people can remember a new product that's launched during that year. So breakthrough is really critical facing CMOs right now. And also in this moment right now, understanding the sensitivity or insensitivity of your marketing messages is really critical. Avoiding brand damage with what message you're putting out into the marketplace couldn't be more important for CMOs right now. And if we don't have empathy for our audiences, if we don't understand how people feel and why they feel what they feel, our message is like, it's like buckshot. We're not going to be on target. We're going to be off target. And we run the risk of offending people and damaging the brand. And then finally, that's related to number two, we have some CMOs who have actually embraced the idea that not only do they want their marketing not to just be socially insensitive, but they see their marketing as an opportunity to have both a business and a social impact. And when we have a social impact, it's not just avoiding brand damage, it's actually about reducing implicit bias, negative implicit bias towards other groups of people. And I love to talk about this because when you think from a grand position, the position that we're in as marketers, when you think about that $1 trillion advertising industry and its impact, macro impact on the world, if we could make reducing implicit bias a KPI for our marketing, we could have a macro impact on inclusivity across the world. And that notion is starting to capture some traction with CMOs. Not only do we want to be socially sensitive and break through, but we have an opportunity to actually make a social impact as well as a business impact.
Right. A couple of things. I want to come back to implicit bias because that's interesting, Team Two. Do you have a couple examples of brands? Well, okay, sorry. First question is your perspective today. All the major, however you define major advertisers, digital, TV, whatever.
Sure.
What percentage do you think are really using these new techniques, some form of these techniques and capabilities?
Still in the early adoption phase in the sense that, but we have crossed the chasm. If you think of this from a new product adoption perspective, crossing the chasm from the innovators into the early majority, it's about 16% on that curve. And right now in the market research industry, you have 18 to 20% of companies who report that they're using these methods within their insights divisions. And that's actually probably an understatement because it doesn't represent the total budget that they're putting against these methods. And what that means to us is that, well, first of all, nobody now is a guinea pig. We've got 20% of the market who's actually tried these methods and is seeing really good impact from it. But it also tells us that there's still a strong moment for competitive advantage here. The vast majority of the market has yet to adopt these methods in full within their insights and their research functions. That means that companies who adopt them now can actually be at a competitive advantage.
Right. So why don't we use, it'd be helpful right now. I know when we talked earlier, you had a couple examples. Yeah. Can you maybe share one or two examples, either set it up and then let's show the ad or whatever you have. And maybe Emily will follow your lead on which ones. I think a couple examples would be good for the CMOs.
That's great. Yeah. So I'm going to introduce two technologies, and there are many, many others, but the two that I'm going to introduce today, it's important for everybody knows that these are online and they're scaled. So we're not bringing anybody into a lab and hooking them up to EEG or skin conductance response to measure their heart rate. Those methods are good as well, but they're not easily scaled and not exceptionally practical for CMOs. These methods run through webcam and through interaction with any mobile device. So we'll show you two technologies. One is the coding of facial expressions on the face. So we'll expose people to an ad, for example, and while they're watching the ad, we'll measure the emotions that they express on their face. And this technology actually measures muscle movement, and muscles move in predictable ways depending on the emotion that's being expressed by individuals. 72 different muscles in the face after the face is mapped are measured for movement. And what you get is a continuous moment by moment line of the emotional reaction to your ad. The second technology that I'm going to introduce is called implicit association technology. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that on the call, it was originally developed by social psychologists in the mid-90s to study stereotypes and biases. Because if you're studying stereotypes and biases, you know you can't simply ask somebody a question and expect their answer to be valid and predictable of what they will do. If you say, hey, are you biased towards this other group of people? What's somebody going to say? They're going to say no, either because they don't want to admit it to you, or the bigger problem is actually they're going to say no because they're not aware that they actually have a bias. We call that the can't say, won't say problem. And what we've done is taken that technology and made it accessible to business to answer any question that someone's either not willing or able to admit in a survey. So we're going to measure what's happening in the non-conscious mind and how people feel toward a brand before and after viewing an ad. And Emily, can we roll the hotels.com example? I think that's that's a great one. And you'll see here in this video, we're going to show you, you can hit play and we'll do a little introduction. This is hotels.com trying to break through at the beginning. This was run about March or April here in the US. And here it goes. Yeah, you can see Captain Obvious there. This is a 30-second spot. Obviously, hotel and tourism hit extremely hard by COVID. And what hotels.com is trying to do here is get people to book now and travel later. The line coming across the screen as you see this is going to be emotion expressed on the face during this ad. We hear the audio.
Emily, can you play the audio?
With hundreds of thousands.
There we go.
Sorry, I realized I was on mute. Let me go back a little bit.
Yeah, just start the video again. You'll see that line, that's overall people, and valence means positive and negative. When you see it's green, it's overall positive emotion being expressed on the face. When it's red, it's negative emotion. And we're gonna lay a line in there. I'll explain that one at the end.
This place. Remember how this was a place? Oh, so placey. The good news is these places still exist. With hundreds of thousands of not your house places all over the world, hotels.com is the best place to book a place. And in case things are still weird later, just choose free cancellation. Beautiful. Hotels.com. Book now, travel later. Amazing.
This was a really good attempt. They're being authentic with the brand. Obviously, Captain Obvious, he's trying to tell jokes. One thing that I love is the sensitivity of this emotional measure. You see that little mountain range there of green? Those are the joke points in each of, as you come to the end of that ad. People are laughing, they're smiling as each of those jokes land. But what's so interesting there with that yellow line, not only are we able to measure overall emotion, we're able to measure discrete emotions. And one of the emotions that you can measure with these new techniques is disgust on the face. And you'll see a rise in disgust among people who feel less safe towards the hotels.com brand after watching this ad. And you can see there's an inflection point here, and it happens on the free cancellation on most hotels. Emily, if you just play to the end there, you'll see what happens at the end of this ad.
Beautiful. Hotels.com. Book now, travel later. Amazing.
Right at the final branding moment, disgust rises. It's a very funny and engaging ad, but you remind me at the end that I can't travel right now, and I'm going to have to cancel this reservation anyway. A really good attempt, but you can see at the beginning that that punchline at the end isn't landing. And I don't mean the joke. I mean the call to action, which is book now, travel later. It's not landing in this environment.
So share with the CMOs in the club this example. How does this work? How soon do they get the data? Did they have tests? I mean, so you're trying to do this, your hotels.com. Did they run this by a subset of people to get those feelings to pick the right one? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Pete. That's so I started off by talking about qualitative research and focus groups because that's how we used to try to get our arms around emotion. Quantifying emotion used to be an oxymoron, right? How do you quantify emotion? You can't do that. Actually, you can do that. And that's what we're doing here. So here you have at least 200 people of your target audience. That's all online. You measure their attitudes toward your brand before you show them the ad. You show them the ad, measure their emotions while they're watching the ad, and then measure their attitudes towards your brand after they've watched the ad. The power of that is that you've actually got change in attitude towards your brand, and you can cut the emotional experience by that change in attitude. And it takes about 24 hours. It's all online. This is automated behavioral science. We're not asking anybody's opinion about whether they think this ad will work, which is what traditional ad testing does. We're not asking their opinion. We're not asking them how it made them feel. We're actually just measuring their expression of emotion and measuring how it actually changes their attitude towards the brand. And that's really what we want. We don't really want to know how people feel about our ad. We want to know how our ad makes people feel. And more importantly, we want to know how our ad makes people feel about our brand.
Right.
And that's what this approach does.
So how is this technology and some of these new capabilities used to help make decisions on what to actually put in the ad that you then monitor?
That's a great question.
What you're going to find is most of my questions are really good, just so you know.
And you'll find
Just kidding.
Pete, you'll find that when I say that's a great question, I'm really just stalling for time to think.
Oh, so it wasn't a good question. That hurt.
That's great. Well, that's actually one of the best pieces of this is that it's highly diagnostic. So you can do this as a screening on all your brand assets ahead of time to make sure that you know that your assets are on brand and actually pushing your brand in the direction on the attributes that you want in the right direction. And you can use it to ensure that you don't have brand damage, like the Dove ad that came out or the Pepsi ad that came out. We don't want those to go to market before we actually understand whether they're going to damage our brand. But maybe one of the most useful ways this is used is optimizing cut downs. So let's say you've got 60 seconds of good content and you've got to produce a 30 and a 15, and you've got to cut it down even shorter for your social media. How do you do that? How do you know which moments are the most effective for your brand? What do you cut? What don't you cut? Right now, we rely on the creative agencies, and they're the experts. They do a great job, but then we turn around and ask non-experts their opinions, which is really futile. With this approach, you can pinpoint the moments that are actually driving the brand outcome that you want and keep those in your cut downs. You can also eliminate the moments that are damaging for your brand and eliminate them from your cut downs. We can show you an example of that. I'd love to show the E-Trade example, Emily.
Get off mute, Emily.
I'm on it.
Might want to go back I think we got to go back just a little bit on this one. And, oh yeah, you're right. Sorry, Emily, you were right. So this is an ad that's out by E-Trade right now. We can definitely do Peloton. I know I would be interested in that one. This is on air right now from E-Trade, and what they're doing is a farce. It's buying on the dips. They're auctioning off a bowl of French onion dip, and we'll watch it right here.
Bowl of French onion dip. I'm going to start the bidding at $5. Thank you, sir. Looking for $6. $6 over there. Do I hear $7? $7 in the front. $7 going once, going twice. Sold to the onion lover in the front row. Next up is lot number 17, a spinach and artichoke dip, beautifully set in a hollowed out loaf of sourdough bread.
Don't get mad, get E-Trade and get more than just trading, investing, banking, guidance.
I mean, the ad is trying to be diverse, right? Look at all the different groups of people that are being represented there. But the first question, is this really good for the brand? This is pre-post measurement of attribute associations with the brand. And you can see a significant decline in smart and trusted with the E-Trade brand after a single viewing of that ad. And perhaps worse, when you measure implicit inclusivity towards Black women in this case, we see a decline in implicit inclusivity towards Black women. Now, why would that be the case? This is trying to be diverse. Well, if we look at the data, this is the negative what we're going to show you here is negative emotion expressed on the face among two groups of people. One is overall, and the second is negative emotion expressed on the face among people who became more negative towards Black women after watching this ad. A little controversial, but let's see if you can find the moment that's related to that negative outcome for Black women. Let's play now.
Oh, sorry.
It's
Keeps
okay.
going back. Ugh. Sorry. The downside of having videos in Zoom.
So we already saw that it was damaging for the brand. We can see here that it's actually damaging.
Is this exquisite bowl of French onion dip? I'm going to start the bidding at $5. Thank you, sir. Looking for $6. $6 over there. Do I hear $7? $7 in the front. $7 going once, going twice. Sold to the onion lover in the front row. Next up is lot number 17, a spinach and artichoke dip, beautifully set in a hollowed out loaf of sourdough bread.
Don't get mad, get E-Trade and get more than just trading. Investing, banking, guidance.
So what we're showing there is negative emotion expressed on the face. And when you're analyzing facial coding data, you want to look for the inflection points. And this is fine, Emily, thanks. And the moment where the woman looks to her side with a look over to the couple that they outbid, we see negative emotion rise among people who felt more negative towards Black women. And it rises consistently to the end of your ad. So first of all, if you had that insight on your 30, it's damaging for the brand. You spend 25 seconds showing people not being smart, and lo and behold, your brand is perceived as less smart after showing it. This ad actually improves preference for TD Ameritrade, not E-Trade. Wow. But here's the bigger issue that I've got on the screen there, Pete. If you had that insight, would this image still be the image you approved for your 15-second cut down? This is the image that the 15-second cut down of this E-Trade ad lands on. This is how it ends. If this is your definition of buying the dips, maybe trading's not for you with that loud noise, boom, boom. If I had that insight, well, I'd scrap the whole thing. I definitely wouldn't put this as my final image.
Right. I love it. Couple quick questions. Julie, do you want to ask your question to Aaron?
Sure. I was curious to know if you see any major differences between B2B audiences versus consumer-oriented audiences, or more specifically, are there differences in the type of emotions you would want to measure?
Yeah, absolutely. There are differences by groups, and you always want to measure this against your target audience. I think one of the big fallacies of some of the early neuroscience firms were the argument that, hey, all you need is 12 men and 12 women in a lab, and you've got some fundamental human truth of how all people will react to an ad. That's garbage. Even with neuro measures, even with implicit measures, you need to have your target audience as your measurement audience, because we all have different values, and our values determine how we respond emotionally. So that's true for a B2B audience versus a B2C audience with different segments. It's also true in healthcare. You know, some of my greatest examples of this come with the measurement of emotion in physicians. You know, the going thought process in healthcare is that physicians are hyper rational. It's all evidence-based decision making, and emotion doesn't influence their decisions. Again, that's just not true. Physicians are humans, and they too are influenced by emotion. Emotion acts as a weighting mechanism on people's choices. So you do measure emotion for every one of those groups. There will be different cues that evoke emotion depending on your audience.
Does that help? Julie, was that helpful?
Yeah,
thank
you.
Okay, cool. Michael, you had an interesting question about segmentation. You want to ask Aaron?
Yeah, it was somewhat answered based on the last question, but really just working to understand, how do you segment responses? So for example, if I'm a new versus returning customer, perhaps can this technology even inform what my segmentation strategy should be? Like, for example, I can see this being a great tool for testing the viability of a new product prior to launch. So I guess the overarching question is, how do you think about segmentation at a more granular level as it relates to how people respond to different content?
Yeah, this is a whole new level of psychographic segmentation. You're using non-conscious memory structures in the mind to segment your populations according to how they truly feel, not just how they say they feel. And since it's quantitative data, you can treat it just like you treat your current segmentation. You probably have a segmentation algorithm, probably 4 or 5 different segments. Typically factor analyses will deliver that kind of segmentation. And you've got a typing tool, a question set that says, if you answer the questions in this way, you're in segment 1, segment 2, segment 3. This is a great overlay for those kinds of segmentation tools because you can understand the non-conscious motivations of those target segments, and you can do it at a quantitative level. And it's so critical because your segments have different values and will respond emotionally differently to a new product introduction. It's not going to be all the same. If you're a product introduction towards segment A, test it against segment A and understand how they respond emotionally.
Excellent. Gabby, you had a question?
But just also, hi, Aaron. I'm Gabby, and just for transparency's sake, because I want to be honest about that, I'm the CMO at Affectiva. So
Hi.
now Pete finally understands what Affectiva does, because Pete, our technology does the same thing in the media analytics space. So we do facial coding as well. But I've spoken to Pete a lot about our automotive stuff. Anyway, I just wanted to be straightforward about that. But I had a question. Do you find that your clients can typically use facial coding insights on a self-serve basis, or do you find that they still come to you for further analysis and insight on the meaning of the data that's the output?
Thank you. It's a great question. Now I know I'm just pausing to think of my answer. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the transparency. There are a few companies that are doing facial action coding really well in the marketplace. Obviously, I think we are. Affectiva absolutely is, and Realize is another great company that got the science right. And that's really important. There are quite a few charlatans in the space and just trying to capitalize on the moment. So I really appreciate the leadership that Affectiva has shown in there over the years. So in addition, let me say, first answer is yes. And what you'll see here is we're simplifying the output on this. If you're not an expert in it, you can get really bogged down into discrete emotions and make misinterpretation of things like confusion, when really it's just concentration. Somebody's trying to read something on the screen. They're not confused, they're just focused. So we simplify it for people who don't want to dig in. We focus in on overall emotional engagement, which is really going to be your breakthrough, and valence, which is positive versus negative. But I'd say, Gabby, one thing that we've done that really helps here is the change in attitude design. It's experimental design on the same individuals. So we have change in the non-conscious mind of an individual, and we also have the emotional expression of that individual during the exposure. And that helps clients tremendously because they can say, I want to see the people who really felt we were more authentic after viewing this, and look at their emotional trace. And it tells you, even if you're not an expert, that, yep, it's second 16 and it's second 18. In my cut down, I'm not going to lose those 2 moments. So when we've automated behavioral science, one of the critical things has really been put parameters around this so that it's easy to understand and applicable, and puts the guardrails so people can't get in trouble.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. I'm coming back to a comment you made earlier, like about implicit bias.
Yeah.
How are CMOs measuring the impact of this on their advertising?
Thank you. I would love to. It is a great question. It leads right into the Diageo.
I knew it was before
Diageo
I asked it. I could just tell. I had a good feeling about that one.
Emily, can you pull up the Diageo example? This was done. This is public. They made it public, and so we can talk about this. We did this in 2018. This is P&G is the look. We'll get into that one in a second. But Diageo is Smirnoff. So the initiative at Diageo was to increase inclusivity, both within their organization, but also within their marketing. And Smirnoff, the brand, is about bringing people together. And so Diageo engaged on this global inclusivity study where they wanted to measure and segment populations according to degrees of inclusivity. And so the baseline was really understanding how inclusive are all of these countries across the world. And there are many aspects to inclusivity. We measured feeling included, sharing the identity, a motivation to act inclusively, inclusive lifestyle choices, and inclusive socializing. And then we're able to segment, this is the US population, and segment into 3 different groups: the isolated, excluded strivers, and inclusive people who will feel included. And those are the proportions in the US population of each of those. Once we did that baseline, we were able to measure whether marketing communications can influence the level of inclusivity within a target population. And we did this across multiple instances of marketing, but you can see in this graphic that Smirnoff was able to make both a social and a business impact by tackling implicit bias. Attitudes towards disabled people changed, and attitudes toward the brand changed after watching a single creative production. That particular creative production was called Deaf Dancer. And it's about a man who is deaf who teaches other people who are deaf how to dance. And we're going to watch it, and you're going to see the emotional reaction among people who felt more positive towards the brand after watching this. And you'll also see it among people who felt worse about the brand. And you'll see the moments that are related to that.
It's not only teach you that they're looking cheap, but they teach you how to hear music. Everybody to the we are not can stop it, stop it. Watch me down, 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 no.
Just love that ad, that top line with all that blue, and you can see it peaking right at the branding moment at the end. That's among people who feel more brand appeal. And you can identify the specific moments in that store that are related to those rises in appeal towards the brand. This one is executed really well. The brand comes in at the end, and it's actually appealing to all people. We have that peak and end rule, making it very memorable positively towards the brand. This was a campaign that not only was good for the brand, but it was good for people. Bias towards disabled people after a single viewing of this is reduced.
Very cool. Very cool. Another interesting topic as I prep for this, and I was talking with Julie, is this whole concept of avoid being tone deaf, how to avoid that. So how are brands using this science or capabilities to avoid being tone deaf?
Yeah. Well,
or being perceived as tone deaf or whatever.
Perceived as tone deaf. Yeah. Well, I think everybody is aware now, and awareness has been raised. And we have a lot of clients who are testing for social sensitivity, understanding if something that they put out could potentially be perceived as negative or biased. And that's actually distinct from something actually reinforcing a negative bias, and really need to understand both. There may be aspects of your ad that are really not sensitive, that are tone deaf, and that somebody will catch on to it and it'll be a disaster for your brand and social media. And then you have other situations where, well, for example, with E-Trade, they're trying to not be tone deaf. They're trying to be on message, but they're actually doing damage on implicit bias towards Black women with that particular ad. Ideally, we want to understand both. And if we could run the look from P&G, I think you'll see a great example of one. This is for the overarching brand, but you'll see a great example of an execution that's done really well. This is actually from a couple of years ago. The look, and it's highly relevant right now. It's about trying to get people to talk about implicit bias. And you may be familiar with this piece. We're going to show you the overall emotional reaction to the piece. We're also going to show you the emotional reaction among these people, the people who feel more inclusive towards Black people after watching this ad. It has the intended effect. Unlike E-Trade, this one is actually having the effect we want it to. So we'll watch this and you'll see a couple of key moments that are critical, increasing inclusivity towards Black people. Phew, I mean, I've watched that hundreds of times. I love that ad.
Results. Wow.
Yeah, and the results are incredible, right? So if you look, when you're analyzing facial coding of emotion, you want to look at the inflection points because it takes a moment for the emotion to be expressed on the face. And so that first moment that you see there, when the father looks back at his son in the pool and he smiles, everybody responds positively to that, but especially those people who feel increased inclusivity towards Black people after watching this ad. And then, of course, the dramatic reveal of the man as the judge at the end. It's positive overall, but incredibly positive among people who feel more inclusive towards Black people after watching this. And I should say that that is implicit inclusivity. This is what's happening in the non-conscious mind. And that's scientific evidence of the efficacy of this ad. So this is a great way for you to measure whether you are on tone or not. Is this authentic coming from your brand? Are you actually changing attitudes in the way that you want to? And is it good for your business and for people? I'd love to show a contrast to that because this is actually, quite emotional as we think about that. I want to show a different kind of emotion. If you could run the Uber ad, this is another great way that CMOs are using this to make sure they're on tone. And this is, again, this is a 24-hour test, causal change in attitude towards your brand, but also the emotional experience among people whose attitudes have changed towards your brand. Sorry if I'm getting too scientific there. Feel more positive towards the brand after watching this? I want to understand what moments are related to that change in your attitude. And you'll notice it's a different emotion. If we could just pause on that screen there, that analysis actually shows us some really good things. First of all, high energy, that's excitement, that's fun, that's emotion too. And it's engaging and you're gonna break through and people are gonna watch that. Quite a contrast to their quiet piano ad that came out first and was really appropriate for the beginning of COVID-19 when they were asking, please don't ride with us. Here, it's wear a mask, protect each other. key moments for the brand. When Umer protects Obi, you can see that second spot there. You see a consistent rise among people who have more appeal towards the Uber brand. And you also see the crossover because the mask is not a non-controversial topic. You can see there at that last moment when we say we protect each other, that moment relates in a decline among people overall, but among people who Uber's trying to reach, those people who have more appeal towards the brand, you see a significant rise in positive emotion. You know that moment, that phrase is resonating with the values of the audience you're trying to convince. So it's a check. And when you can do this in 24 hours, why wouldn't you check it?
So another question, again, not getting into politics at all, but how can brands, how can CMOs kind of placate polarizing right and left and stay true to their brand? I'm just curious, have you been involved with decisions around brands with those types of things, and how has your technology helped with capabilities?
It comes down to not just being a message about being inclusive. It comes down to doing it from the voice of your brand. So when you have these studies, we're showing obviously change in inclusivity or change in positive, negative emotion towards groups of people and overall towards the brand. But you really want to do it on your core brand attributes. What does your brand stand for? And that can be your tie breaker. So you can have an ad that is good for people, but if it's not good for your business, if it's not moving the brand in the direction that you want, that too is not a positive outcome for you. So we suggest a 2x2 analysis, which is business impact and social impact. Social impact may not be one of your goals, but we can all say, I think we can all agree that unintended negative social impact is actually one of our goals. And so if you look at your marketing by the social impact and the business impact, you don't have to make a social impact, but you do want to avoid a negative social impact and obviously be good for your brand. The brand attributes can help with that tiebreaker.
So I just spurred another thought. So CMOs listening, CMOs in the club, they're interested, in this, what are some lessons learned from approaching this over and above saying, hey, hire us, we're amazing, obviously. But I'm just saying, when you want to start changing the way you look at, start incorporating this into your capabilities, right? Into your decision-making center. What are some pitfalls? What are some lessons learned you've seen that you can help CMOs so they make sure they're implementing it correctly? What are some things they should think about?
I think that the first thing is don't try to come in and replace everything that's going on in the organization with your ad testing with these new techniques or these new methods. That just runs into a brick wall. But rather, treat this as like a complement to what you're currently doing and get some early wins. So if you do a screening across, let's say all your online, all of your online ads for the last year, just to get a sense of whether they're going in the direction that you want them to for your brand or not at an implicit level, not only do you get a baseline on where you're starting, which is a great place, but you start to generate some meta insights. And I think that ends up being the type of data that will really turn heads within your organization. Our clients tend to find success when we can pull out of 50 to 100 different tests insights on which elements of their advertising are having the effect on their brand that they're looking for. That means they have fundamental learning for next year's campaign development, but it also tells them how to optimize their media spend in order to get the biggest bang for their buck. And when you can start to show financial impact, better spend, then you start to get buy-in from the rest of the organization. I'd also say that incorporation of your current KPIs is really important in the beginning, but you need to have an organization that is open to change. Our most successful clients are those who've come to us and said, we don't want to put out any more average advertising. And so, when something on norms scores below 50%, it doesn't get the green light. Our best clients actually use this to optimize the media spend. And so if you're in an organization that's hungry to put out better marketing, and obviously to make a business impact and have a social impact, then this is the kind of technology that will get you there. If you don't have that organization, it's going to be a tougher road to hoe.
Excellent, excellent. Any other questions from the group, from those on the VR?
I did. I actually put it in.
Oh,
chat.
I missed one.
No worries, no worries.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what I was wondering, Aaron, is so a few months ago we did research with Kantar on all these COVID ads we're seeing, right? Like, oh, we're all in it together and all that stuff. And yeah, we found in our research that there was quite a bit of negativity to these ads, unless the brands were showing that they were being truly helpful given the crisis. Yep. And we also saw that people really have an appetite for business as usual and actually for humorous ads. But I've also seen research from others in the space, in our space, that have said other things. I was just curious, have you had a chance to look at some of these COVID ads, and have you found something similar or maybe something different? Because we're getting inundated with these ads still.
Yeah, we are. And I just give you a couple of examples. Some, all of this being public, can't reveal obviously the client work, but public work. One of the great examples that I'm seeing has been a change in the sonic identity for brands during COVID. And a great example, we've tested this a lot of different sonic ads. This one is for McDonald's. You know, the McDonald's sonic, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, very happy, da-da-da-da-da. It's not right for this moment. it's people are hearing that and they want to feel happy, but I'm not feeling all of that joy. And what is McDonald's doing now with their sonic logo? If you've seen any of that work recently, and we've tested this, so we know that it's actually more appealing. The ad is, the sonic logo is, forgive me for singing again. It's a ba-da-ba-ba-ba. It's a little more, a little bit more sign of the time, still consistent with the brand, still slightly playful, but not over the top, in your face, joyful that people aren't using right now. And so that, that's an example of a brand staying true to itself. It is about joy and fun, but staying consistent with the moment. And so, it's got to be authentic coming from the brand. We've seen some successes like that, and we've seen some failures too.
Yeah, that's such a great example. Actually, I hadn't seen those new McDonald's ads yet, so I'm going to go check them out. Yeah, it's about authentic empathy, right?
That's exactly what it is. That's empathy. It's understanding the emotional state of your audience.
Very cool.
And coming to them at that level.
Thank you.
Gabby, I agree with you that the amount of ads that came out where you're like selling shoes and you're like, we're all in this together. You're like, what, trying to figure that out. But any other questions? Any other questions from crew? I just love this conversation. It's so interesting. Let's see here. What about this then? So Aaron, why don't we do this? Well, is there anything else that maybe I haven't asked that would be beneficial just to share? We have about 5 minutes left. Anything else? I want to do kind of final advice, but anything else, topics you think I may have missed or that would be valuable for the CMOs to hear about?
Yeah, I would, may I show you one more example? I just want to drive the point home. Everybody, this happened right before COVID, but it was all the talk of the town. You want to see some data on the Peloton ad? Let's take a look at that one. Yeah.
I'm waiting for this one.
I mean, in hindsight, this is obvious. Some of our testing actually showed that on first viewing, this wasn't that offensive, but if you had seen it before, it got really offensive. We're going to show you a couple of examples. One is the overall line. We're going to show you the line among women, and then we're going to show you a moment, a line among those people who became more disgusted with Peloton after watching this ad. And I would just say, if you had run this 24-hour test before you put this in the market, you wouldn't run it. Ready? Here we go. Starts off okay, actually. It looks like it's Christmas morning. We're ready for a gift that's just about to start. You can just let it play. Yeah, just let it play. And you'll see the anxiety on the face of the main character and what that.
Yes. Now, a Peloton? Give it up for our first time ride.
All right, first ride. I'm a little nervous, but excited. Let's do this. 5 days in a row. You surprised? I am. 6 a.m. Yay.
Rising with the sun.
That was totally worth it.
Let's go race in Boston. 50 rides.
She just said my name. A year ago, I didn't realize how much this would change me.
This holiday, give the gift of Peloton.
I mean, if you had that data before you went to market, you wouldn't put any money behind that, right? And what's amazing, I think, about this moment is that we're now in a stage of automated behavioral science. We don't have to rely on lay people's opinions of our ads anymore. And this is, we're relying on lay opinions of people who think that advertising doesn't affect them to tell us how we should change our ads. It's crazy. We have automated behavioral science that tells us not only how people actually feel, but it tells us how their feelings towards our brand change. And people,
so Aaron,
go ahead.
I have something related to this particular one.
Yeah.
How much are people, does the science say that people are influenced by being told how they're supposed to respond? What I mean by that is somebody that would maybe see this ad and say, oh, that's nice. And then they get the barrage of how awful it is and all of that. Then they go back and relook at it and go, oh, now I see it. Yeah, that is crap. And so how much does media, for example, influence the people's reactions? Or is it so innate that it just is?
Yeah, it has a profound effect. And this thing came out, obviously, and there was the controversy immediately. So we didn't get to test it before it actually came out, but as a proxy measure, we tested it among people who were seeing it for the first time versus those who had seen it before. And for those people who had seen it for the first time, their emotional reaction was like, it's kind of okay. It wasn't a great ad, but it was positive, you know. Among people who had seen it before, you saw this line that you saw here, down, down, down in emotional reaction. So yes, the social context has a profound effect on how people view the same media. We just did a same blog post on this, on how people can respond differently to debate, given the debate tonight, to debate coverage, depending on whether it's branded conservatively or liberally. The brand on it has a profound effect on how people react to the same exact content.